Welcome to the Mindful Mutiny podcast. I'm Jeremy Van Wert. On the Mindful Mutiny podcast, we thoughtfully rebel against anything that keeps you from achieving your highest potential. I have a wonderful guest, a guest that is in the entertainment industry, a guest that is a producer, a drummer, and a mixing engineer, JD Lyon. Thank you so much for being on Mindful Mutiny.
Jeremy, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, man.
JD Lyon, also known as Joe Devadonam, is an accomplished solo artist and professional drummer based in Atlanta, Georgia. With over 20 years of experience, he has made a significant impact as a versatile session drummer, collaborating with artists in Americana, rock, and country genres. JD Lyon has secured endorsements from renowned brands such as Los Cabos Drumsticks, Vertical Drum Company, Same Here Global, and Music Doing Good. Beyond his impressive drumming career, he boasts an extensive touring history with over 2 decades earning respect and recognition from colleagues in the music industry. Featured in interviews, podcasts, Drum Magazine, and even making appearances in movies, JD Lyon is multifaceted and is on a journey with passion and music and entertainment. I'm so excited to have you here, JD, and to get to talking about who you are and how you got to where you are.
It's funny because when you hear your bio, you're like, I did all that, because you're so caught in the here and now, right? So like I heard all that and I was like, wow, I forgot I did all that stuff. That's kind of amazing. Like, and so shout out to my manager Ryan Block for writing that because I would have never written all that myself. I would have been like, I'm just a guy in Atlanta who wears hoodies and makes music. So how's it going? So
Well,
yeah.
it's a pretty impressive resume, and
Thank you.
so you've done a lot over the years. And can you talk about what it is that you're doing now and how it fits into everything?
Absolutely. So, right now, so one of the things I've learned in my life, both professionally and you know really personally, is evolving. And to not to overly plug myself, but I do have a record called Evolve or Die that I wrote that it's kind of a concept record specifically on you know what what to do in life. Like, I mean, you're faced with choices where if I don't do this, then this is going to happen, right? A lot of conditions, right? And so you know I was faced in that when I was going through a really rocky relationship where I was like, if I don't change certain things, then this ends. And then with COVID, when COVID hit and like all the touring stopped and all that stuff, right? I was like, I can be a dinosaur and let this all die and just hold strong to like maybe things will open up and all that, right? Or I can evolve and become this different person. And so I chose to evolve and and go into being a producer and and all that stuff. And so uh to take you into now with what I'm doing, I've evolved again, which is now I'm really focusing on the other side, which is I'm still releasing music. I have a bunch of new music coming out this year. I'm actually going to be working on a new EP with my friend Ryan Thomas Holly. And he's sorry,
We're going to start again with Brian Thomas Holly. You're
Ryan.
saying, Ryan, you're saying more than you think you are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So 5, 4, 3.
Okay. So I'm working on a new EP with a good friend of mine named Ryan Thomas Holly. We're going to be starting writing sessions fairly soon. I'm I haven't we haven't quite nailed things down yet, so this is just more of a tease on top of a tease. And so we are also sorry, I know I realized I have like a bunch of things that I'm saying for. It's just it's a lot of processing happening up here. Okay, so we're working on this new EP. And then on top of that, I have several singles that are going to be coming out in 2024 that I'm really excited about. And then my newest venture that I'm the most excited about is I have a brand new sort of, let's call it a business, but it's more of an extension of my label Lion's Way Studios, which is I'm introducing Mixed by JD Lyon. And so what it is any band, singer-songwriter, pop artist, name it, send me your tracks and I'll mix your record. I'm just joining the legion of great mixing engineers in the world, but where I strive to set myself apart is for being able to mix records, but from a musician's angle, right? While I have like the scientific background, the engineering background from it, which I'm going to school for, but while I have the sort of like this is what you do in this scenario, I also mix musically, and so I can speak the language. I can speak. How would I say this? I could speak. Say a singer doesn't know how to convey this thing that they want with the bass part. I can do that. I can figure that out. Or the drums. The drummer doesn't know how to communicate that they want this sound, but I can decode that. So mixing from a musician's standpoint. That's so mixed by JD Lyon. That's going to be my new thing that I launch in 2024. So I'm really, really excited about it. I'm looking forward to working with a lot of different artists, and I'm going to really be focusing on producing as well. And so by producing, I mean producing bands, uh, singer songwriters, all that kind of stuff, and I can flex myself, so to speak, on multiple genres. So I'm really excited to be basically living in a studio, and essentially my mixing room is upstairs in my home, and I'll be spending a lot of time in there.
I noticed this big change in entertainment and music. I mean, we all did when we were kind of sequestered at home and watching YouTube and so forth, where these fantastic musicians that would otherwise have been gigging are now sending music files to each other and making music on YouTube for
Mhm.
clicks. And a lot of these really fantastic artists would just do magnificent covers
Oh yeah,
of old songs
oh yeah.
and put them up, and it just changed where the performance happened. And so it sounds like you also were in that kind of like the music industry is changing right now. It is kind of democratizing where you can be a performing musician from your home studio, and you are riding that wave.
Well, I'm riding the wave, and it's also the future. Because with back in the day that I grew up in, and I'm 41 years old, and so I got my start in this business when I was 14, so it'd have been 1996, right? And in those days, the record companies were still king. And in many ways, and this is a fairly get off my lawn topic, but like in many ways, I still kind of miss some of those days, partially because music seemed to be more valued, because you miss that joy of going to the record store and like buying the new Nirvana record or something, right, like, and then you get the packaging, and and you listen to it, and then so we're missing that, so I kind of miss those days. But what I do love, and to your point about democratizing, is anybody who picks up a guitar and buys a little audio interface, which is what I'm sure you have. You connect your microphone to it, right?
Yes.
And so anybody who can buy an audio interface, a cable, a guitar, and a halfway decent microphone, they can record they can record a song, right? They can just guitar and singing, right? And then from there, there's all of these avenues all over the internet and places and people where you can go and you can take that one little thing and make it sound like a huge hit record. That did not used to exist when I was growing up. And I know that if I would have had the tools now, then I could have been making records that sound enormous, and that's the part I love about now is that you can be somebody in Urbandale, Iowa was the first place I thought of. So you could be somewhere in Urbandale, Iowa, who's like, I really like singing, and maybe they can't play guitar, and maybe like their friend can. So their friend records a little guitar part. They sing, right? And then they go online, and then they go find someone like me who's like, can you make this more? And I'm like, sure, I can. And so I go and I do my thing, and then I add parts to it, and then I mix it. So they went from like, having this one idea to having to, when you hire the right people, you can go from that to having this like really professional grade, this could be played on the radio type of thing. And you can do this for a few $100. Whereas when I was growing up, when you went to a studio, especially when you worked with like the major label thing, I watched this video the other day on YouTube. Um, Nowadays, if you had 20, $30,000 that you spend on a record, which is, still it's a chunk of change. But in making records and stuff like that, 20, $30,000 when you worked on a record for somebody who was on, say, like Warner or Atlantic Records or something like that, right? I'm not kidding. In 1996, 97, $20,000 was what they spent on the food in the studio. That was your budget for craft. Like, let's not get into studio time. Let's not get into, instrument rentals and things like that, right? And so, when you had these records back in like the late 90s, they cost as much as my house. Whereas now you can achieve the same thing for and have the same tools that they used in those records through monthly subscriptions, which are cheaper than Netflix. You can, if you have like the proper ear for it, you can get a fairly cheap, audio interface, for $100, and then some hustle and going on the internet, doing your research, learning who people are, and finding good people to work with, and for a few $100, it's really that easy now. And this is a very long way of saying I do like the democratization of the music industry in that regard. The barriers to entry are gone, and I really like that. But also too, because of that barrier dropping, it puts people like me and the large artists, it puts us on notice. Like we have to keep up with that. And so that goes back to the original point I had about evolution. And so that was the next phase of evolution for me. So I'm pretty excited, and I want to see where this goes. But I feel like this is going to be a good year.
That's awesome. And you're talking about the late '90s, and that I was busy doing the same sorts of things, and I was in a heavy metal band, and we recorded all of our stuff in a garage on an 8-track, right? And it was muddy and it was very unclear.
Mhm.
And in our final months together, like the last 2 months, when we were just kind of like, okay, this is kind of it, we're all going to college now. GarageBand came out, and we
Mhm.
recorded 2 songs using GarageBand. And I was kind of like, guys, I think we may need to rethink like what we're doing with our lives, because all of a sudden you could hear how freaking good we were. And because you could hear the music and it wasn't just mud, and
Exactly.
but then it became the I already got accepted to this place, I already got accepted to that place, my mom would kill me thing. But I was like, this recording is really good. So, and that was the beginning of the end for the big muscle music being
Mhm.
the beginning and the end of whether or not you're going to make it as a musician, right?
Right.
So it really is a fantastic thing. And I'm curious, like, what was your childhood like? Where'd you grow up?
So I had a really fun childhood. I grew up I was born in Houston, Texas, and I grew up in Southwest Houston. And my parents, being Indian, like there's that Asian mindset of like, you do this little music thing and it's your hobby or whatever, but you're gonna go
Okay.
be a doctor, a lawyer, whatever, right? And so, but my parents were different. My parents are, we're Christians who are very liberal in terms of like what, for Indian culture. And my parents were very supportive of the journey that I started, and I'm very proud of it because my dad, when he came from Hyderabad in India, he came to North America with damn near nothing, right? And then started this whole thing, and he was just a real trailblazer in his family, right? And music for me, I never realized until I was a lot older that I was really just trying to like follow him, and so I was the trailblazer in my family. I was like, I'm gonna go be a professional drummer and I'm gonna go win Grammys and all kinds of shit like that, right? And so I I started with that, and basically I got my very, very first kit when I was 12 years old. And it was a $75 little red Remo drum set. It was the most that my mom could afford. Got it at a pawn shop, and I came home, and when I brought that thing home and I set it up and everything like that, the first thing I thought was, I was like, I'm going to play this every waking moment that I have, right? And I did. And on summer vacations, I would be in there for 8 hours a day, just playing. And then I don't know what it was, but like I envisioned this life of performing. And so, summers in Houston, those are, that's like 96 is a cool day, right? And when I was in my garage, we would have air conditioning in the garage, right? And so I actually cut the vent, and I would practice for hours with no air conditioning because I wanted to simulate what it would be like under stage lights. And and so I did that, and I worked my ass off, and I basically pushed myself to heat stroke and then pulled back. And then and I put in my 10,000 hours. And my fun fact was that I went to high school in Sugar Land, Texas. And in my high school, I was the only person who got into Berkeley. Only person. And Berkeley School of Music. I was the only person. And my band director actually hated me, legitimately hated me. And I was able to go and do all this music stuff, like basically behind his back. And so I played my first paid gig when I was 14 years old. I played a pool hall in Southwest Houston. I got $50. And what did I do with the $50? I went and bought Mortal Kombat. Because, hey man, 14 years old, 1996, what were you playing? Right?
Exactly.
so so I took my gig money, and I went and I bought Mortal Kombat. And then it was at that point I realized, I was like, oh my God, I can make a career of this, And then I started playing around Houston, and little did I know at the time that some of the venues I was playing were some of the most, legendary places for some rock people. I played there was this venue in Houston called the Abyss, and I played there many times, and it closed down like I think mid 2000s or something like that, right? But Nirvana, a little band called Nirvana, came through there, and would you believe the Abyss was the last place that they played before this little record called Nevermind came out.
Wow.
And so Nirvana played the Abyss, and then the next time they came through, if I'm not mistaken, I think they played the Summit, which is the arena. Like it was the basketball arena for the Rockets. So they went from this 100-person club, 100 200 capacity club, and then they blew up, became the Beatles of our generation. And so I was a few years out from playing where they with Nirvana, and Pearl Jam came through there, and all of these great, like, name a great rock band, they all, like, when they came to Houston, they played there. And so I was cutting my teeth in these venues, and then coming to realize later, I was like, I was a teenager doing that. And then I have like some of my students who are like, 15, 16. And I think about how, like I was getting snuck into the back of clubs, to like go play drums, right? And because these were not all ages places. So basically the band would go set up, they'd open the back door, I'd go play, leave. So uh but I never realized until like I started having the my drum students that I have now, and I look at them and I go, I was in a club at 10 o'clock at night playing with, 20-year-olds. Like, this is wrong. Like I couldn't imagine like doing that now, but it was a different time. And then I slowly but surely uh built my way up until 2004. I started playing with my friend Brandon Stanley, and he had a top 50 hit on Billboard. And that's when the world really opened up to me. And that's when a lot of the people I met and that I know now, and just the circles I run in with like national artists and stuff like that, it all came from that. So I went from being like this sort of local regional touring artist to like playing, huge stages, and, being national. And like, I remember I met Rob Thomas, and from Matchbox 20, and I remember I'm hanging out with Rob Thomas, but I have that sort of, duality of like, here I am hanging out with one of the biggest pop stars in the world, and I still live with my mom and dad. Like, so that's music in a nutshell. Is, you go and you do something like, people who went and saw me when I played amphitheaters, they see this guy like, in the opening band, playing, and it looks impressive and all that stuff, right? They don't know that I was a 22-year-old kid who was, doing this while going to the University of Houston, taking classes, living with his parents. And so like that, so it just sort of, I just sort of worked my way up, and eventually I got into doing country music, because that was another evolution, right? Rock and roll
Can I
sort of.
ask you, can I
Yeah,
ask, can I just cut in here and ask you
yeah,
a
yeah, sure,
question?
sure.
Because you're going somewhere here and there's so much to unpack here. So
Yeah, there is.
you go to a regular high school, you go to University of Houston, and there's so many things here that I'm just kind of picking out as you had to make really definitive choices about who it is that you wanted to become. Number one, immigrant families have a lot of dreams on the shoulders of their children. They have a lot riding on, and they can often be very directive of what their child does and does not do because there's so much that they have invested in the reinvention of their own lives. They have these great views, and it usually goes into being a doctor, being a lawyer, like these sorts of very defined careers. And you're going to high school and University of Houston, these kind of like very classical industrial educational things where you have teachers telling you this is the only way to success in your life if you get this kind of education, and this is how you do a resume and these sorts of things. Meanwhile, at night you're playing clubs as a very young man, and your family is supporting you enough to buy you a musical instrument. They're so invested in you chasing like what would be considered an American dream.
That's exactly right.
That's really remarkable.
I never, it's funny. I never really think about that. But you're right. I mean, and the thing was is that my mom and my dad broke their backs. You know, my dad, my dad did so much in air conditioning and um, business. Like, he was doing import export, and he was 30 years ahead of his time on some product on different products. And my mom started. We moved to Houston in 1979. I was born in '82. My mom started as a teller in what was called Texas Commerce Bank, which ended up becoming JP Morgan Chase. She started as a teller in '79, became a personal banker, and worked her way systematically enough to when she retired in 2016, I believe it was 2015, um, four steps away from being CEO at Chase.
Wow.
And so, there's a lot of hell that goes in that. And so
I'm aware.
so here I am, being a kid, like, to your point, like, immigrant family, right here I am watching my mom sacrifice and struggle. I'm watching my dad constantly work himself up, something happens or whatever. Here's this genius thing he has and all this stuff, and here's the thing he does to help people and all this. And it's not easy trying to do it here. And so, my parents were always like, "Hey, if you're gonna go do something, go be the best at it." And so I was like, "Okay." So that's what I'm gonna do. So I was like, "I'm gonna go be the best damn drummer I can be," and that's what I did. And and so the condition, the condition of having very understanding, supportive, and loving parents is I still had to go to school, and it couldn't be for music. And so, which was a real bummer because I got into some great music schools, man. So like it was a bummer, but it at the same time, I'm glad I did what I did. And everything you learn over time. I think and for everybody who watches and listens to this, that you do at one point grow up and realize, my parents really were just doing their best, and my parents really were looking out for me. And one of the many, many ways that I realized that, where I realized that was me not going to music school. Because even though like I would have loved to have gone to Berkeley or University of North Texas or Miami, all places I got into. Um, I am glad that I have an economics degree from the University of Houston, and I can apply that anywhere in the world. And so some people say it's a fallback or whatever, but I think you said it, of just being well-rounded and multifaceted. My family required my brother and I. My brother is a media giant himself because he did the same thing. He trailblazed, and now he is for cultural stuff in the city of Houston. You have to go through him if you want to be something, because he's the editor of Culture Map in Houston, and he is a giant in the city. And when a new restaurant opens up or if something cool is happening, they're coming to him begging him for coverage. And so that was the thing, is that he knew he was going to go be this communications giant and uh, do it that way. I wanted to go do music, and so my parents were like, "We will support you. We'll do everything we can for you to do that. Go be great." And so yeah, that so to me, I don't look at it as an American dream. I look at it as, I don't have a choice. You got to do this.
Well, they're supportive of you. I mean, it's really remarkable because the two of you didn't just accidentally end up being incredible people. That comes from a solid set of values and goals and how to actually do it. And you got to watch your parents, both of them sound like incredibly disciplined human beings in the way that they went about their own careers and made it happen for them. That's remarkable. You said that they were Christians.
Mhm.
Through your life, has spirituality of any kind played a role for you?
Absolutely. I mean, I I am a practicing Christian. I have my opinions on churches, but
Sure.
because I spend most of my life uh, either attending or working in them. And so there's the we can have a whole conversation about the contemporary Christian construct and uh, industrialization and all that, but we're not. And but I will say, but something that I know we'll touch on is that I am, as of October 23, I'm 5 years sober. And when I found my
Fabulous.
sobriety in 2018, faith was a huge part of it. My mom is a very, very just she is deep rooted in the Christian faith.
Mhm.
And and she prayed for me. And and during a time where in sort of the mid 2010s, I had gotten away from my faith, and she had just earnestly prayed for me to come back. And then I had to hit rock bottom, found my faith, and then I never looked back. And so, yeah, to your point, I'm very much a Christian spirit. Spirituality, faith dictates the moves I make and the life that I live. And I've drawn the line in the sand, so to speak, of I'm not going to preach to you. I'm not a prophet. I'm not, I'm not some, I'm not trying to evangelize, but at the same time, faith does dictate what I do. And if that's a problem, then that's okay. I still love you, but this is who I am. And so yeah, yeah, spirituality is everything. It's the reason I get up in the morning is because I thank God.
In 2018, you had kind of a reformation in your life, obviously. And what was it that you may look back on and see that you were missing about your own value that you discovered through your path to sobriety?
Spent many years of my life feeling hollow. Um, I was a you I was a very celebrated binge drinker. I when being a drummer, my biggest influence was John Bonham,
Mhm.
and for those of you at home, drummer for Led Zeppelin, and you know, for as amazing as he was on stage, he had this legendary offstage, sort of hedonistic thing he had going on, and one of the things he did was that he was noted for his crazy excess of his drinking, and I had the same thing. And so over the years, and as you ascend in the music industry, whatever vices you're into, you have to pay less and less for. So binge drinking for me was a piece of cake, and it was cheap because it was always provided to me. And so it got really, really out of hand. And then I struggle with my mental health, and so my mental health dipped. And so instead of finding someone like you or a therapist or anything like that, I turned to pain pills, and so I would pop pills and I would drink, and then in the morning you feel like crap. So I popped Adderall. So and then I just repeated the cycle for like a year or two until finally in 2018, my relationship with my ex was like was really bad, and there was a lot of stuff within that went really sour, and I I felt so hollow. I felt missing, and so I on October the 20th, it's the day that I it was the last day I took a drink. I had, what was it, 10 or 12 double Maker's Marks that night, and I popped about 4 hydros that night, and then I went home, and then I just, I hit that, like, sick and tired thing of, like, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, and then I quit cold turkey, man. And and then, you when you're down there, it's either, that's you tend to find God in the valley, right? And so I was definitely in my valley, and that's how it all started.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that. You know, the most well-rounded people I know are the people who have not only suffered but are willing to talk about what it was like to suffer, and what it was like to discover the value in themselves. So thank you for that.
Thank you. My
Yeah.
pleasure.
And you had begun talking about your road into, after University of Houston, and you were getting in, you were starting to do music with other people, and your career was starting to go up. And I kind of sidetracked that into your history.
Yeah, so career wise, it just it was sort of a steady stream up, right? And so I got involved with a lot of different people, and I got to meet some amazing people along the way. And one of the things I did was I spent some time in Nashville. Whenever I was in town, I never lived there, but whenever I was in town, I got to go do I got to go be a part of a few sessions where I worked at a place called, like, it's not the demo farm, but it's a demo farm. And basically, for what a demo farm is, for those who are not in the music business, um, let's say let's take that same story I took about the person in Urbandale, Iowa, right? So you have your song and you have a dream. And so you go to Nashville and you can walk into a place where you're like, here's my song, and there's a room full of incredibly seasoned, just out of this world, amazingly talented musicians that are sitting in a room. We get handed some pieces of paper of like, this is the song and here's the structure and this is how it goes. The engineer presses record, we play our parts, we do our thing, they put a rough mix together, and then they hand you a disc and they say, here's your song. And then they take that and they go directly to Music Row in Nashville and they start shopping themselves. And so this was something I did like in the mid 2000s, early 2010s, so one of the things that I joke about is when I did those sessions, we never knew who these people were, right? So, this could be just, somebody from Urbandale, Iowa, or this could be somebody, that you listen to now. And the thing I joke about is I, when I did some of the sessions, I'm like, I don't know who got signed from that. For all I know, Jason Aldean came from that, or or like Luke Bryan, or who knows, right? Like I have no earthly idea who I played for. So that's the amazing thing about that part of my life, is that I've done some sessions. I've sessioned with a lot of different people, and most of the records I had, they weren't like gold records or anything like that, but I have been involved in some things where I do wonder, like I do wonder, like, hey, did that person go on to do something, or so it's it was in that part of my life. It was really really fascinating, and it made me musically grow up. And what I mean by that is, there's a time where if you want to stick in this business, where you do realize that music is a career, and like anything else in a career, there is that maturation you have to have of like, this is my job and I have to wake up and I have to be on time for these things, and I have to have a good work ethic if I want to get callbacks, and I can't, so many people when they think of musicians, they think of all of the bad stuff, the excess, the partying, being a rock star, all that nonsense. What they don't know and realize is that there are people who go to work every single day in the music business, and they are no different than the person who goes to an office. It's the same mentality, you know? Uh, and so me growing up in that studio environment is that, they'll be like, they've booked an hour of time and you need to go and have everything done within that hour. And so if it was 2 to 3 tracks or whatever, that meant with all the time of like recording and playing back and all that stuff, I needed to be perfect. Right. And so there wasn't, me playing and it's like, oh, I dropped my stick, I need to start over. It's like, nope, nope. You have one take or you have two takes at the most. And that that stuff makes you that stuff makes you hard. And and especially with the fact of like, when people talk about time as money, I learned that really hardcore in the music business because, for some people, a simple mess up here and there just cost that person $5,000, because they had to go over time or something like that, right? So that really made me grow up. And it was another thing too, is that I had to learn how to practice. And so let's just say you're doing session stuff and then you're playing gigs and then you have to have like a job to, do that, or you're still in school or whatever. You still have to keep yourself up. So I learned, so then I learned another huge life skill of multitasking and prioritizing. And, so it's amazing when people look at something that they see on TV and they see the star factor of it, they don't realize that there's as much or more of a grind doing this than there is working in an office. And I'll be completely blunt with you on this one. Um, the average person who like goes to work as an 9 to 5, and God bless them, I'm not talking mess about them. The average 9 to 5 person, if they were to do the same grind that I did for 15 years, and have to do it repeatedly, and like in that just sort of like uh head down kind of thing that I had to do, it wouldn't last. It wouldn't last. And the reason why is because what the grind is in the music business is a whole, is 99% awful for that one thing you do. And every single working musician who's ever been around will go, yeah, that's true. And because it's that 1% that makes it worth that 1% makes it all worth it. And so the other part that I learned in spending my life in music doing that is working in the corporate world was a joke to me, because I was like, you guys call this hard work? It's like, I remember having to like pack up a show in Provo, Utah, drive all night to go play in Amarillo, Texas, and then play that Amarillo show, directly go from Amarillo to Houston, Texas, which is a 12-hour drive, and then go play something that morning. And stay until 7 p.m. is hard for you? So like when people tell me, they're like, oh, this is going to be really hard and it's going to be a lot of work, I'm like, no, it's a joke to me. And so that's the one thing about music that I learned, is that like I really learned the profession part of it. There's being a musician, and then there's being a professional musician. And what it was, and going back to my story about being in Houston and all that, I didn't want to grow up to be a rock star. I wanted to grow up to be a professional musician. And I really held on to the word professional. And you pointed out something with my parents about being disciplined and all that stuff, right? Subconsciously, it just hit me that I'm just trying to be them in the music world.
Mm.
And that's really fascinating to think about.
Well, it sounds like you are, and there's a great amount of legitimacy that there is in the way that you have gone about this, because the music industry is like any other industry where, and you had mentioned very early on, I put in my 10,000 hours. That's the kind of thing that it takes. And you're right, the 99% of the grind to get the 1% of glory. That's how most of those kinds of positions actually work.
Mm-hmm.
And now that you're in the post COVID environment, you're doing it again in the inventing of a new thing in your life, the evolution of a new thing. And I would imagine that through the years, with all the changes in the music industry, with all the ways that you have had to change from being probably a studio musician and then switching into being a touring musician and then going back to being a studio musician, where you have to be versatile in being able to do that sort of stuff. You have to get along with people that
Oh yeah.
are, most of them are nice and not all of them. You have to be really dedicated to your long-term goals of what you want to be.
Yes, that's exactly right. And you know, you being a mindset guy, right? The the greatest piece of advice that I got was in 2003 in the music business, where um, my friend Brandon, and then we were having this talk with like some other tour managers and stuff like that. We're just drinking, having a laugh or whatever. And the greatest piece of advice was in 2003 that I got was, be cool and shut your mouth, because you never know who's listening. And Jesus, did I learn that lesson in the music business, especially in a town like Nashville. So, like, for example, if you go, and this happens every single night of the week, but you go and you get drunk and you start popping off about somebody, right? Little do you know that when you're popping off of that somebody's best friend is one table over from you. Or that if you pop off about like an A&R guy who could sign you and change your life, right? You're like, so and so's piece of crap and all that stuff, right? Well, did you know he's actually right back there, because he's hanging out at the same place as you are. And I learned really quickly, thankfully not to my detriment, but I heard it once and I held on to it. But it is amazing how far that piece of advice has taken me. And it's not just in the music business, it's just in life. You know, the more that you just let, people just let things lie, so to speak, right? And the less backbiting and gossiping and just shit that you talk, right? People will look at you differently. they'll look at you and they go, oh, I can trust that guy. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, I don't know. But at least you're not coming off as childish, or at least you're coming off as somebody who takes care of their business. And in the music business, especially, if you have somebody who is cool and can adapt to every situation, and you know that you can trust them to show up on time and all that stuff, it is amazing how far that'll get you. It is amazing. Like, there's a lot of people who are in really high powered gigs because they did those two things. And so you apply that mindset into your everyday life, and you will see a growth from it. And I really do hold on to that. And another facet of be cool and keep your mouth shut is I try to tend to keep my hopes and my dreams really guarded, because I've really learned from my family, especially, about how, you really learn that the more that you do, the more success that you have. People don't support that. The average person doesn't support growth. They don't support. They're not like, we just want to see you win, right? They may say that, but people, the nature of people tends to be that they want to be negative, right? When you see celebrities doing cool stuff, there's always negative comments, right? And it just seems like the more successful, the more negative, right? So I've learned to keep, the goals and dreams and visions to myself, and just to my to my very, very core people, right? But then also too, I do for the rest of the world, for my friends and everything like that, I do everything I can to support them. And I really do mean it. I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Like for you, I will support you and love you and guide you whatever, in any way that I can for you, right? And I want to see you win. I want to see everybody win. And and I've learned that it may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, it may not be next year, but it always comes back to you, always. And I am fairly certain that mindset has kept me afloat in this business that I have lived in, where I have seen now, what, four different iterations of it, from the late 90s to when everything fell apart in the recession, to the digital age, to post COVID. So I've now seen in my lifetime four different industries. And I think the reason why I'm still standing is because of that one statement.
Wow. So what are your goals and dreams and missions? No, I gotta, I
Win the
gotta,
lottery, man.
there it is. That's the sustainable
Powerball.
plan.
$20 a day. Like, we can do this.
So you ended up going into like Americana country, rock and roll sort of thing. What I would imagine, like I love the genre called outlaw country, and I
Oh
imagine
yeah.
that there's some of that in there too.
Oh yeah. I did a lot of stuff with that.
How did that become the direction that you went?
So you want to hear something funny about that?
Sure.
So the recession happens in 2008, right? And it's a horrible time for the country, and I can tell you plenty of stories that I have friends that were signed to, major label deals, and then when the recession hit and we had the mass layoffs and all that stuff, right? I had friends who were on tour and they were just living their lives, and then uh, the record companies were just quietly dropping people, and then they had a credit card, and that they would use for expenses and all that stuff, right? They're using that credit card, and then it gets declined, and then they find out that they've been dropped, and then they are stuck. And so I have plenty of stories from that, from all of that, right? And so what a lot of those musicians who were stuck and all that stuff, rock music more or less died around that. And so you have all these amazing musicians, and they needed to go somewhere. And so one of the things that's very interesting, I think as of 2021 or maybe 2020, I can't remember, but 44%, I believe, of all music sold is country music.
Wow.
And
I had no idea.
yeah. And so because, when you think about it and you look at all these different people, it starts to kind of hit you. You're like, oh yeah, Blake Shelton. Oh yeah, Luke Bryan. oh yeah, Keith Urban, and all of a sudden you start thinking these names, and then you're like, oh wow, that's a lot of records sold, right? So all these people needed a place to go, and so that you have all these amazing rock musicians, and same as me, they evolved, and then those rock guys that you saw playing with like uh, just random rock band, they went and they started playing for Jason Aldean, and that's how, and you may have noticed that around like 2009 2010, you may have noticed like, hey, anyone ever stop and think about why country sounds a lot different now, why it sounds a little bit more rock? Yeah, it's because people like me went and started playing country.
So this is so interesting. Like me and my stupid little head. I
No.
country music has traditional country
Mhm.
has the old style beat. You probably won't be able to hear this. It's the tick tack tick tack tick tack tick tack tick tack.
Mhm.
That's the Johnny Cash beat,
Exactly.
classic country,
The
right?
train beat, yeah.
But what is happening now? The more that I listen to it, it is Western style rock and roll.
Yes, that's exactly right.
It's got some twang, it's got some southern accent and everything like that, but it's rock and roll.
That's it. It's rock and like when you really stop and look at the arrangements of country music now, if you were to take out dirt roads and country girls and
Beers.
beers, right? If you took those out and you took it into a different topic, it's a rock song. Here's a
Yes.
great example. If you had Jason Aldean, like Jason Aldean had that huge hit, My Kind of Party, right?
Yeah.
If you took My Kind of Party, had Sebastian Bach sing the same words, that is a metal song.
Gee. So it's really
It's
country
crazy,
is
right?
less misery, more pickup trucks. That's
Basically.
that's country. Yeah, okay.
And so all of these great rock musicians for all the rock bands that just basically went and died outside of the legacy rock bands that we have now, like the Foo Fighters and all that.
Yes.
Um, all these guys went and started getting gigs in Nashville. And then with that sort of rock bent that these guys brought, that's when the face of country music changed. And then you notice now that when you go to a country concert, like if you see like Stagecoach, right?
Okay.
You go see you go see these guys at Stagecoach, and then outside of the fact that they may be wearing cowboy hats or they may be wearing boots and buckles and things like that, you're like, wait a second, those are Les Pauls, and there's huge Marshall stacks and big drum sets, and you're like, wait a second, this is a rock concert, and except they're doing country. And so that really happened like right after the recession. And so that's kind of like the pivot point of like where we went from how music used to be versus how music is now.
Well, I'm kind of wrapping my head around that because that genre of music, the modern country, is what's played. Because I live in a very small town in the
Mm-hmm.
mountains, and we have a little tiny supermarket, and that's what's played all the time. It's the modern country. And
Absolutely.
as I listen to it, all of it has like a similarity to it. It's all to a rock, a very 4/4 rock backing
That's it.
that is not traditional country. It's more of that rock and roll. But when you're talking about the the change in rock and roll, and that all of my musician friends who are heavy metal people, they live in Nashville.
Yep.
They all live in Nashville, and they've changed a lot of how they dress and the aesthetic and everything like that because that Western country thing is so darn popular.
And it goes back to my thing about evolution, right? If you're a rock guy and you want to stick around in the business, you're not going to do it playing rock and roll, right? So you're like, all right, I can play, but I need to go find a gig, right? So all these guys, you have this influx of people that go to Nashville, and then the genre changes because the sound changes, and then uh and if you want to look at it from an even further zooming out thing, is that like Nashville was a pretty small town back in like the early 2000s, right? Like it was, we'd go and it would be like, it's a cool town, of course, but I would never say Nashville was like this huge metropolis, right? Well, when you start to think about like how many people that have moved to Nashville over the last like 15 years, and then interesting that it kind of started right around the time the country really changed. And then isn't that strange? Like all these
What's
people from California and all this stuff moved to Nashville. Music changed, place exploded. It's real.
I'm just kind of like thinking about your life context. You're the son of immigrant parents from India.
Mm-hmm.
You decided to play music. Your parents supported this. You went all the way through. You got a degree in economics, and you went headlong into where the winds took you. You knew you wanted to play music, and the winds took you towards this genre of music, which is where the popularity is and everything like that. And you become this uh, this full-fledged like rock star from a background that wouldn't necessarily be the traditional rock star story. And there you are. Has it been hard to maintain relationships with people in your life with all the traveling and all of the things that you've done?
You, short answer, short answer, yeah, yeah, yeah. I would say short answer yes, long answer no. Um, because I mean, I'm assuming with relationships, you're talking about like romantic relationships.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I would say so because uh, with my ex that I was with for 7 years, um, when we met, uh, I was touring a lot, and when I was touring, I mean, I was gone for 6 8 weeks at a time, kind of thing, and and I told her, I was like, this is how life is. Then it's only going to get more serious after that. And then and what was eventually what was cool about me at the time, like, oh, I'm dating this touring musician or whatever, right? Life starts changing, right? And it's like, oh, well, you start settling down and you're buying houses and you have a job and you get a dog and all this other stuff, right? And all of a sudden that sort of like that whole glamour of like, oh, my boyfriend is a touring drummer, to, ugh, my boyfriend's on tour again, and so I dealt with that. And the musician thing in one way or another always got thrown in my face for something, right? It's like, you know because like they would get around their circle of friends or whatever, and then they'd have whatever opinions they have about musicians, and they come back and then they throw it at me, and I'm like, well, you just met all these like real deal pros that are in my life, and then you're listening to somebody who has an opinion about a musician because they saw someone who was in a bar playing covers, and you're trying to equate that with what I do. And so it it's not about like me being at a different level or anything like that. It's just more about the fact of it. It really takes, if you're a musician and you're trying to keep a real relationship, it takes somebody who has to really see you, like see you as a person, and not see you as this thing. And I realized that in my relationship, the partners I had before, they just saw me as this thing, but they didn't see me, right? Like, you have seen me more in the what hour that we've been talking, that's than some of the people that I've dated in my past. And it's amazing how twisted that stuff becomes, because like, and if it sounds like I'm getting agitated about it, it's because I am. I have a lot of trauma based around that, and like my patience level with that crap is gone. And I'm and of course, you have like the Googling thing. Like, I remember I went on this date a few years ago, and this girl was like, you know oh, I was, yeah, and I kid you not, I'm not this. I just realized this, like, oh my god, yeah, this is good. This is a hilarious story. I went on this date with this girl, and she was like, my ex was a musician, and so I really didn't want to go on a date with you, but you were kind of hot. And then I Googled you, and then you were really fascinating. So that's why I'm on a date with you. And I was like, are you kidding? Like, they were like, yeah, you have like that like cool profile on Google, like the Google panel. They were like, oh, I saw your Google panel. And that's when I was like, I want to go on a date with you. Bro, I kid you not. It's exactly what it was. And so I had a lot of that. And thankfully now I'm at least dating somebody who has some substance and understands that like this is the life I've chosen and all of this stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of musicians. Like when you have more musicians on your on here with like this, and they talk about it, like we've all been through it, and we just want to be seen as people as opposed to like what we are or what we do, right? Like LeBron James is not just a basketball player, he's a man. He's a dad. Or uh just any actor or anything like that. And so it's just it's way harder than you think. And it's, to me, it's unnecessarily hard. It doesn't have to be that hard, but it is.
Well,
That bothers me.
Neil Peart from Rush wrote the anthem of this very thing that you're talking about. And you know what I'm talking about in the song Limelight. I
Yep.
can't pretend a stranger is a long awaited friend. And like that whole thing of the isolation, because what you're talking about is that you live a non conventional life and that you often have interface with people that live a more conventional life. I would imagine that there's been times where it's been relatively lonely.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because um there have been so many times where I have been in, let's just say, a professional party, right? And I would, and it's funny because those who chose convention, right, and they went in the more conventional professions, things like that. So I tend to date professionals, and so I remember there was one time I went to an event, and the girl I was dating at the time was a lawyer, and so I was, we're hanging out with all these lawyers and stuff like that, and they're talking about me being a musician or whatever, and and it just so happened that at the time I had hung out with some really really huge stars. And I hate name dropping it, but it's just more it was a thing at the time. But it just so happened that when I was at this event, about a week prior to that, I was hanging out with Taylor Hawkins from the Foo Fighters. And
Cool.
and God love him, that was one of the best nights of my life. But so I mean, I was hanging out with Taylor, and then a week later I'm hanging out with these lawyers, and it's so funny because this this group of lawyers was way more judgy than the collection of stars that I happened to be hanging out with the week prior. And then and I'm having these conversations, and some of them were like, I legit got asked once of like, they're like, oh, so did you go to school? And I was like, yeah, actually I did. And they were like, they were like, oh, where'd you go to school? I was like, University of Houston. And they were like, really? Like legitimately like, oh my God, you went to school? And so I got really agitated. So I was like, yeah, I have an economics degree. And if I decide to go back, I'll have a history degree. And then if I really, really wanted to do it, I'm about a year out from a religious studies degree. And they were like, oh my God. And and so that was one of those things. And I was in like my early 30s when that happened. And I realized, I was like, wow, this is what my life is going to be like. And and so it's like, and so that was a really good lesson as to why, like, when people like ask about celebrities, and they're like, why do celebrities ever date normal people? Why do celebrities date celebrities? That that
Brilliantly said. I'm sure that you have seen the congressional inquiry where Dee Snider was
Mhm.
brought before this congressional hearing to talk about obscenity in music. And
Oh
he
yeah.
walks in, he's got the makeup on, the big perm, everything like that. And he walks up there and they think they're going to eat him for lunch, and he body slams them because of his incredible accuracy in the way that he spoke about music as a profession. And they
Hmm.
underestimated his just raw intelligence. And I think that that has decreased overall, but it's still there. It's still a thing that
Hmm.
the musician, the actor, the entertainer person is not functioning maybe at the same level as that panel of lawyers that you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah. Exactly. And like we're still living in 2024 in that whole thing of like, oh wow, that person, went to school and actually graduated. Wow. Isn't that cool? And it's like, dude, well, yeah, there's still people. And there's one thing about that, to your point. Uh Social media really helps in a way, because like with that sort of like day-to-day thing, because you start to see like I don't know, like someone like Shaq when he went back and got his like criminal justice degree, right?
Right.
Like yeah, and then and Shaq is actually legitimately brilliant. He's actually really really smart, but people just see like the Labrador side of him and they assume he's an idiot, but he's really really not. And so that's the one thing about social media, at least, is that at least we're starting to see more of that, those kind of stories come out, and just seeing like how entertainers and athletes and stuff are doing that. um but yeah, it's amazing. One of the things that I learned in conventional versus unconventional, I find people who went conventional to be far more judgy.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I found them to be much more, well, it's more of like the being 41 and not married and not having kids with the conventional people. They're like, well, what did you do? It's a lot of like, what'd you do? And I'm like, well, I went and lived that life. And it's funny. I wonder if you had the same conversation with your parents, but I did. And I don't know if you like on YouTube. Have you ever watched Rick Beato on YouTube?
I've not.
So he's a music producer, and he's basically turned himself on YouTube to being the guy for the music business. And like basically, it's like you get endorsed by Rick, and that's he's the guy. And I went and I saw him here in Atlanta. He actually lives in Atlanta, and I saw a show that he did, and he talked about, and he led the show up by saying, um, he grew up and he has like 10 brothers and sisters. And he said he was talking to his parents and he was like, I don't want to live a boring life. And that was his whole thing. He held on to that. Like for me, was a little kid, he's like, I don't want to live a boring life. And my my thing that I had, like after I saw that, like that really resonated with me. So then I called my mom and I was like, hey mom, when I was a kid, did I talk about like not wanting to live a boring life? And she was like, all the time, all the time. And so somewhere, like, I guess when I was younger, I mean, I credit that to my big brother. Um, but somewhere along the way, I was just like, I saw where people were going, and I was like, no, I'm good. I'm good. And I have friends of mine who I went to high school with, and they're born and raised in Sugar Land, Texas, and they never left. And they're perfectly happy with it. And I just looked at life and I was like, I would die inside if I did that. And so, but the thing that's hilarious, after some of them who did that, they don't like me, and they never liked me. And um that was a weird thing. And that's when I really learned, like, yeah, you choose a side. And I chose my side, and I'm staying on my side. And there are many, many times where conventional and unconventional link up, and it's a beautiful thing. But for the most part, it's a weird, when you go with this life, and I'm sure you've experienced it with the way that you do things. For some of the people who went the other way, you ever notice that there's a lot of resentment? when they talk to you, like that underlying tone of resentment, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's where I'm at. And it's just, like even for a couple really close friends of mine, there was that initial bit of resentment. And I was like, well, but I chose this, man, and I worked at it. And I sacrificed a lot to keep this. And I would do it, I would do it 8 days a week, and I don't regret anything. Like it's gonna, and it gets better, you know. And I like being a musician in my 40s. I like it way more than I thought I would.
This is leads to an interesting discussion here because I've had so many opportunities in my life that I have said no to that would have been really interesting, but they were things that required risk.
Mhm.
And I was too chicken to say yes to major opportunities in my life. And where those decisions based in fear led me was conventional jobs that just rot the soul. My first 5 years of my career, I worked for the Social Security Administration doing
Oh,
claims. It was it was as bad as it sounds.
oh,
Yeah, it was. It's something. It was something, and there were more and more of these decisions, and the fear was, what's going to happen to me if I don't have a paycheck coming in every 2 weeks with health insurance and dental? Like, what happens to my life if that's the case? And so I spent my entire career in corporate America, and I raised all the way up to being the CEO of a company, which sounds great. It was awful. Um, but those decisions put you around people who learn through an entire career to follow rules, to be
yes.
strict adherents to being rule followers, conventional thinking, conventional ideas about fear versus security, conventional ideas about how to spend your time, and that you work all year for really 1 week of a vacation in Cancun. And then you come right back and you start again and you're like, wow, I spent that great 5-star resort vacation thing, but really the rest of the year you live within a 5 mile radius. It really has been an overall detriment, I believe, in my own life because of the decisions that I made based upon fear. Now, I want to ask you about fear in your life and the
Oh,
decisions that you have had to make. How did fear and overcoming fear and risk factor into you doing this?
man, that's the $1 million question. And how did it's funny. I mean, we all have those moments, right? Where even people who live unconventional lives, they have things that they missed out on because of whatever. Like, I could have gone and taken this gig because I wanted to stay with this one because I was making money, right? We all it's that same decision that you make, but in different, and it relates to whatever it is in your life. For example, I mean, this I, like I, to sort of illustrate the point. When Taylor Hawkins joined the Foo Fighters, he was playing drums for Alanis Morissette, and at the time, Alanis Morissette in 1997 was arguably the biggest pop star in the world, right? She was huge,
Deservedly so, yes.
enormous, enormous, right? So Taylor's got this great gig playing for Alanis, and here comes Dave Grohl. I mean, and it's like everyone's like, oh, everyone knows who Dave Grohl was, but at the time, Dave Grohl was still the drummer for Nirvana. And so here's Dave, and he's going to Taylor, going, "Hey, man, join my band." And Taylor's looking at this, going, "Well, I'm playing for the biggest pop star in the world, but I'm going to take a risk and go play with Dave Grohl." And when you think of that now, you're like, that just doesn't make sense, right? But you have to look at things at the time. And so for me, I I wish I I have several things in my life where I didn't I missed out on certain things because some of it was just me being tired. Like I had this one thing of where I was my friend Brandon, actually, he was blowing me up one night, and And he was like, "Hey man, just come out, come hang." And I was like, "Dude, I'm exhausted," because I had played, 4 gigs and all this other stuff, right? And I was exhausted. And then turns out the reason why he was blowing me up to come hang out was that there was this blues cat named Sonny Landreth that you may or may not have heard of, but he was, pretty famous blues guitarist. And at the time, Brandon was talking me up, and Sonny needed a drummer, and had I gone and had I hung out with Sonny, I more than likely would have got the gig that night. And I looked at his schedule later on, and if I would have joined him, had a few, practices with them, and all that. One of the, I think it was the third date of that tour that year, he was playing this little place called Jazz Fest in New Orleans. And I was like, shit, that could have been me. So like, but at the time I just was like, I didn't take that risk. I didn't step out of myself to go and just, suck it up and, not be, and just, go put on a happy face or whatever. But
Mhm.
fear, I mean, you have to have a strong stomach to do this, you know? Um, and one of the things that I thought about when you said your CEO thing is that my brother actually, when he was making his ascent in media, he's been around some of the biggest, entrepreneurs and business people, out there. And one of the things that he said was that, he was like, there's the worker bees, but he was like, the CEOs are kind of the rock stars. CEOs and entrepreneurs are rock stars. And when I think about it, he's absolutely right. And the reason being is because, it's the same thing. Grind and grind and grind. You become the star in the business world, right? And so what I learned with entrepreneurship is that there's no bigger place where you talk about risk and fear and everything than starting your own business, as you know. And so like, yeah, I like especially this last 6 years of my life has been nothing but fear in the traditional sense, because I didn't know what sobriety was going to look like for me. I didn't know what not being a drummer was going to look like for me anymore. Uh, and then doing this new pivot thing of like, I don't know what this is going to look like for me in terms of being, this producer and being this mix engineer and all this other stuff, right? Like all I can go by is that the fact that it's my instinct is taking me here. But yeah, I'm scared. Because like I'm like, did I make the right decision? Because I could easily go and throw my name in the hat to go play with some guy in Nashville with two first names, or or I can do this and bet on myself. And I'm choosing to bet on myself, and it's it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I'd like to come out and be like, yeah, man, I did the right thing and I'm not scared and all this stuff. And it's like I wouldn't say I'm scared with this choice, but I also have like this healthy amount of reason of like, well, this could go really poorly. But I feel like you take the fear and you look at it for what it is, and then you look at where you're at in life and you go, what have I been through in my life that can combat this feeling? And when I realized how much I have been through and how much my family has been through and how like struggle and sacrifice is woven into our family fact, our family flag, right? All of a sudden this doesn't really scare me anymore. And so I think it's all about benchmarks. And whenever you're gonna jump into something, I think, you know, um, you look back in your life and you go, what was the scariest thing I've ever been through? And then you compare that to what this is. And if this isn't nearly as scary as that thing that you went through, then just do it and don't look back.
And so this fear, it really sounds like what has happened is your battle scars through the years, your success and failure, recognizing that the fear of the failure was worse than the failure,
Yes.
has
Yes.
gotten you to a point in your 40s where you're a bit less fearful, or at least able to handle it better?
Oh yeah. I'll get personal and I'll get raw with you now. That relationship that I told you about where I got sober, um, it was very toxic and it was very abusive. Um, and and I am starting to realize that, in the therapy that I went through at the time and continue to go through, my therapist had told me in our breakup in 2021, she said, it's going to take you years before you realize what you went through. And I'm realizing how many of my decisions were based off of where I was in the scope of like emotional abuse, right? And so taking it to where I've come to this new moment of fearlessness in my life. So in March of 2021, um, I was going through some health challenges. Like I was dealing with like dizziness and ear stuff and all of that, right? So I was going through that and I'm getting tested for all these different things. And then at the same time, right in the middle of like this health thing, my ex and I had this one last conversation. We had agreed to get back together. And I said the condition of getting back together was to, just forget the stuff of the past and we truly start over. Well, she couldn't do that. And so we had this one last conversation about, how stuff from the past. And then a couple days later, I'll never forget this day. I was about to go warm up some lunch and my ex comes home early from work and she gets back and we have this conversation and she was like, this relationship is over and I want you to leave right now. And I was like, but I'm in my home. I own this home. My name is on the deed and all this stuff. And she was like, no, get out. And so I had to figure out. So that started this whole journey of like, where am I going to sleep? And
Oh, Lord.
you know, and then so I it was and so like when that happened, I immediately started. My brain just went, and I was like, all right, well, I need to schedule a moving truck and I need to find movers and all of the other stuff. But then I'm like, but also my health sucks. And then I'm reaching out to different friends, going like, well, do you mind if I stay here tonight? And all this other stuff. So then that kicked off this whole year of 2021. And then 2 days after that, I got diagnosed with Meniere's disease. And so, and it was funny because at the time my ex was like, I think you're making this up and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and I remember, and I texted her like 2 days later and I was like, hey, by the way, that thing you thought I was making up, I actually have it. And so I was like, it's just information, whatever. So in that week, a 7 year relationship ended. 2 days later, I got diagnosed with an incurable disease. 2 days after that, I moved completely out of the house that I bought. And so going to your back to your thing about risk, when I had a week like that and I went through, this was March, I bought my home here in August of 21. So I had 5 or 6 months, 6 months, I believe it was, where I lived on the run, so to speak. And when I say I lived on the run, I mean, I lived with my mom. My mom was in Houston. I lived with my mom but my life was in Austin. So I was driving 2.5 hours each way to go and live my life that I had in Austin, but I couldn't live in my house anymore. So here I am, just driving all over Texas, living my life. And to this day, I have this duffel bag that I won at a company Christmas party of like this place I used to teach with my friends. I have this duffel bag and I lived out of this duffel bag for 6 months. And to this day, I look at that duffel bag and I still get like, I don't like looking at it because it just reminds me of like living on the run. And so I tell you this story because it goes back to fear. Like nothing scares me anymore. I'm not like it sounds weird, but it really doesn't. It really doesn't scare me anymore because it's like I went through trying to like find a place to live. I walked away from my home that I put years into. I had to say goodbye to my dogs, and they were like my kids. I
Mm-hmm.
walked away from everything, man. And so when I think about how I made it through that, and then how I made it through having this incurable disease that affects my hearing, that affects me as a producer, as a musician, and all that. I'm like, no, man, none of this shit bothers me anymore. And so I'm like, and it's like I like taking off an Emerson quote of like, or Emerson or Thoreau, no, it's Thoreau, I think it is. The no Emerson, go confidently in the direction of your dreams and live the life you always imagined, right? Mine is go confidently in the direction of your dreams, led by God, and then everything else will sort itself out. So that's where I'm at. And
Well,
so like I've made these of like going back to the very beginning of evolution, man. Like I have evolved, and the way that I have evolved is by putting faith in God, and then everything else is everything else.
it's interesting. I mean, you talk about falling and hitting the ground pretty hard. And there comes a point sometimes for a person that really ends up getting it where you fall and you hit your head hard enough that you just make a breakthrough. And that breakthrough is beyond fear, beyond self-limiting ideas. And that's where you've gone. You at a certain point fell hard enough that you woke up and you're like, wow, it seems like life has reshuffled. It seems
Yeah,
like
yeah,
my capacity, my threshold for
hmm
fear and self-doubt and everything like that is now changed. And there's
hmm
you only get there through falling that hard. It's like the
yeah,
experience of somebody who's done something that most people don't get to experience, like just say a combat veteran. You don't know
yeah.
what that's like
Until it
unless
happened,
you've been a combat veteran. That's the only way you get that.
100%,
And so
100%.
and you have fallen hard enough that this different capacity for fear is something that you just don't get. You have to earn it.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, and to your point, I have some friends who are decorated combat veterans. It's kind of hard to live in Texas and not, you know,
Sure. Yeah.
and so, um, but when I went through that thing, I do struggle with PTSD from it, and and just a lot of elements of that life I had. I do have PTSD from it, and I remember talking to my friend who's a decorated Marine, and I was like, I feel really shitty talking to you about PTSD because you killed people, man. Like you did horrible things in the sense of like you did things in service of our country that are beyond of what could ever be asked for. And and you are forced to live with this, and it's unfair, and you deserve so much more than what you got, right? And here I am, and I'm going through like just bad stuff with the relationship, and I'm like, dude, we are not the same, like because I truly, because like I mean I look at him with reverence, right? And the thing that blew my mind was that he told me like he said it so matter of fact, like he was just like, trauma is trauma, man. And that really just exploded me because you know it doesn't necessarily need to be, you know, pulling a trigger, right? It can be anything, and and so going back to fear, it's like you said, falling that hard redefined fear for me. But another thing too was that I refused to be a victim. I absolutely flatly refused to be a victim, and I have done things that I'm not proud of, but I've also had some really crappy things done to me, but I refuse to be a victim of it, and I choose to learn from it. And what I decided I was going to do was I was going to choose to be good. I was going to choose the good of it. And every day I've committed myself to choosing the good of the situation, and then seeing where that falls.
Yeah. That whole trauma is trauma. That was kind of what I was waiting to say, and then you said it, where this combat veteran had talked about it. And every trauma is just simply different, and it one trauma is not any rank any higher than any trauma per se, because it's about the experience of the individual, and the things that you have gone through creates how you experience a thing, and that's what spells the outcome of it. The nightmares are the same, the reactions are the same, the fear response and triggers, they happen at their capacity based upon how you experienced whatever it was that occurred, and whether it was a protracted, long-standing set of traumas or a single trauma. It's stuff that makes makes us react, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly, man. Exactly.
Yeah. You,
And it's a lot to learn from, you
mhm.
know. And but you're right. Everything you're saying is dead on right.
Yeah. You also work. I noticed that one of your endorsements is Music for Good. Can you talk about what that is and how you
Yeah.
work with it?
Music doing good. It's awesome. I haven't had a chance lately to do more of it, but basically what I've done in my career with those guys is basically just expanding music programs. And so the cool thing I used to do, and I miss this, is I used to go through Music Doing Good, and I would go into like different schools. And it just so happened, like when I was in Houston, I went to like inner city Houston schools, and and I got to talk about music, and I would play like little bongo drums with kids and stuff like that, and that was a lot of fun. And so that was basically doing the thing of like it's just using music to give back. And so like I haven't done that since before COVID, but that was mainly the thing, was just, I had a friend of mine who is real, she was real, like I guess a higher profile in terms of the arts and nonprofits in Houston. And so she got me in with Music Doing Good, and I just kind of went with it. And I, like, one of my big passions for like the nonprofit stuff is more access to arts in school, because with school layoffs and stuff like that, the arts programs are always the first to go, right? And so being able to come back to schools and be like, here's what you can do instead of, and so for those inner city schools, it was just like, for some of them, it's like, hey, instead of going to a gang, here's what you can do, like, making music. And then eventually, one of the things I would love to do, and I just, you just reminded me that I should reach out, but I would love for some of these places to where it's like, hey man, instead of like going and doing bad things, how about just go make some beats, and having access to that and showing them how easy that is, and just kind of doing those kinds of things. So that was mainly Music Doing Good. It was a lot of charity stuff and a lot of giving back and a lot of really cool events of like being around kids and kind of stuff like that. And so but I love it, and they do amazing work.
Well, and you have these other endorsements as well, that you've gotten over the years. You work with some pretty interesting companies.
Yeah, Los Cabos was my very first drumstick endorsement, actually. And I signed with them in 2013. And I it was really cool because they're a Canadian drumstick company, and Canadian companies mean a lot to me because of my dad, being in Toronto, and our family coming from there and stuff. And so um, I signed with them, and they have been rather patient with me because I'm not necessarily one of their, I used to be one of their more out there like artists, like constantly playing, showing off the sticks and all that stuff. And they've been patient with me because I don't really do that anymore. But 5 years or 7 years into my endorsement, they allowed me to have a nameplate. And so now I get drumsticks with my name on them. And so like that was one of those like really cool life achievements of like when I've gone and played shows, I've like thrown sticks out into the crowd and they're like, oh my God, it's got his name on it, and like that was one of those really cool like life, sort of life achievements, right? And and I'm very, very, like, they gave me that. They gave me that sort of attainable thing of like, I'm on the same level as some of those guys you go see where they have their names on their sticks and all that. Like I reached that level, And for that, I'm very grateful to them. And I basically told my rep years ago, I was like, "Hey, man, I'm with you guys for life." And I refused to. I had a couple offers from some different stick companies, and I just flat out told them, I was like, "I'm never leaving." And they're like, "You sure you don't want to join?" Like Vic Firth was one of the ones.
Yeah,
I got
great
like
company.
I got offered Vic Firth years ago, and I was like, "No, I'm good." And they're like, "But literally every person you love is on here." And I was like, "I know, but I'm with Los Cabos. They believed in me first, and I'm with them for life. And they're a family company as well too. And so like the dad started the company, and like basically the main people that run it are all the same family. And family is everything to me. So I was like, wait, family run company, not part of a subsidiary, let's go. So yeah, like I love those guys, and I'm very very grateful for them. And um they've introduced me to some really cool people in my life, and they believe in me, and they've even they've even gone and championed some of the stuff that I've done. I'm like, because I've had the conversation, I'm like, guys, I feel bad. I don't play 150 shows anymore, but I'm doing this now. And they're like, no, you do this because, eventually you can show drummers that they can do this. So they've given that level of belief in me to go and be me. And so it's like, dude, why wouldn't you be loyal to that? And so, and then with Vertical Drum Company, they built the snare drum that I play, and they do custom drums and all that, and all the basics within being a custom boutique company. But I became one of their artists, and
Wow.
they they built my drums, my snare drum to my exact customization, and my exact customization was actually based off of Alex Van Halen's snare drum. And so
These drums are beautiful.
they're
These snare
beautiful,
drums
right?
are gorgeous. They're works of art.
Yeah, yeah.
And for those that don't know, the snare drum is so critical for the sound of a drum set. And it's drummers, if they play a different drum set, they will bring their own snare drum. They might get an endorsement from a company, but they say, yeah, but I've got this Ludwig bronze snare drum that was made in the 1960s and it's my
Exactly.
thing. Can I play it? And since it's behind the other drums, oftentimes the answer is a reluctant yes. But that drummer, that snare drum is very specific, and it sometimes takes a long time to find your sound. And it looks like
Mhm.
you have here. What a wonderful little boutique company.
Oh, they're awesome. They're based in Oregon. Super shout out to my guy Joshua Rainey.
Yeah.
Started the company, uh and also and just they and what's really cool about them is they're actually very faith-based too. A lot of their artists are they play with big name Christian artists. And so that was another thing that attracted me to them. And so like I constantly root for them, they root for me. And and it's a really cool thing. It's a really, really cool thing.
Can you talk a little bit about Same Here Global?
Yeah. So my friend Eric, he started same, like it's his thing. It's a movement. And so it's hashtag same here. And basically what it is, it's a mental health initiative. So when I was getting sober, I, we sort of bonded over a shared love of sports, because he actually was from the sports world. He's worked with like the New Jersey Devils, New York Islanders, for in the hockey world. And so, he was always interested in music stuff. And I mean, and to be completely honest with you, I love sports more than I love music. And so like, so it was just a natural sort of thing. And, when I talked to him about how like, I was struggling with bipolar too. And I have severe depression, and I'm sober and all this other stuff, right? And he was horribly depressed too. And so, but he started this whole thing, and the whole thing of what hashtag same here is we're all in it together, right? Like you're depressed, I'm depressed, same here, right? And so it just became this like mental health initiative, and he has just been just growing leaps and bounds with it. And he travels around the country and gives talks, and he weighs in on whenever there's like a big athlete that has a mental health thing, he weighs in on that and gives perspective and things like that. And so I try. So basically, the same here. What I do is I come on places like here with you, and I talk about how, hey man, I struggle too, and I go to therapy and I take meds, and and I stay on top of it. And so that's that, that same here thing, and so we've turned into really good buddies. And here's here's a fun story for you with that relationship. So he's a really big dude. He's like 6'4", 6'5". And for me, I'm 6'3". And so one of the things that we bonded over is the fact of like we travel a lot. And so, being tall and coach is not great, as you know. And so one of the things that we do is anytime that we're on planes, we do the legroom picture. And what the legroom picture is we're in our seats and we see how far our knees are into the back of the seat. And so there was one time I was sitting in the middle seat on a 737 for Southwest, and I sent him a picture. I was like, I'm in the middle seat, but check this out, bro. It's like I actually got some decent leg room here. And so we constantly are like we constantly text each other pictures with like the whole leg room thing. So but yeah, he does amazing work. I'm sure you'll like, if you can link to him, that'd be amazing. But he's just he's just made a safe place for musicians, athletes, and people just to be, just to be like upfront and to be safe with like what they're going through. And so it was really through his sort of guidance in a way, to where he was like, hey man, you've got a little bit of a platform, talk about the stuff you have, it's okay to. And so I do, and I'm actually a lot more upfront with it than I ever thought I would be.
No, I thank you for talking about it, because I've done a lot of treatment as a mental health professional and
Mm-hmm.
everything like that. And one of the main problems, and it's particular to bipolar, honestly, is the resistance to treatment. And schizophrenia is similar, where people will go, I feel okay, I'm going to stop going to treatment or stop whatever treatment is prescribed to me. And then there is this devolution of thought and behavior and all of this sort of stuff. And all of that just really is based out of somebody feeling isolated. I wish that I was normal like the people around me. And the more and more people raise their hand and they go, like, I've got that too. This is what I've got to do. I have to take this medication. I've got to do this. And then I can have functional relationships.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing just removes stigma and gets more people to be what we call like treatment compliant and all of that.
That's interesting because I mentioned earlier about how I spent a lot of my life feeling hollow. Like in my
Mm,
adult life, I felt very hollow. And one of the things I learned from my psychiatrist I had in Houston when I first got diagnosed, he was like, "Hey man, that feeling of hollowness, that's tied to bipolar."
mm, mhm.
And so and obviously there's the negative connotations of being bipolar, right? And but at the same time, it's like, well, I kind of wear it as a badge of honor, because it's like, I mean, well, if you like who I am, then that is part of who I am. And so really it was funny, like diagnoses can be helpful sometimes, because at least it made me understand myself a little bit better. And so I use it to my advantage now in some ways. Like whenever like I take regular medication for it, and but one of the things I know is that like I can kind of see it coming, and I'm like, oh well, I'm feeling a bit manic. So one of the things I do with my mania is I make music. So like I'll have my manic creative spells, and I'll have like dude, I finished an EP. And then like I'll come out of the manic, and then I'll crash. And so I've learned to kind of use that sort of, I don't know what you call it, like use what should be a detriment, and I've used it to my advantage.
Oh, well, that's brilliant, and so it's so functional, and it's you. I'm listening to this kind of the themes of the overall story that you have here, and you've overcome unbelievable things. you've dealt with real depression. You've dealt with trying to self-medicate to escape what sounds like a good deal of emptiness and loneliness and these sorts of things. You've had relationships that have been very difficult because of the change or the odd schedule that a musician has to keep to remain a part of the game, a part of the
Mhm.
whole thing. It's not a commuter job per se.
No,
And
no.
it's a job where you have to keep moving, you have to keep relationships warm, and that sort of thing can really be exhausting over time. And you've overcome these things. You've overcome fear, and you've overcome the difficulties in being a part of a profession where it's just difficult to maintain these relationships with people who are not in the industry.
Yeah, it is, but it's worth it.
Yeah,
It's worth it, and I have it tattooed on my right arm. But I just never give up. Just
yeah,
never give up, and and like it's unfortunately, that phrase, I think, is in some ways become either well past overused or even cliche now. But I just I got that tattooed in 2009, and it's funny because um all the times that I wanted to, I looked at my arm and I was like, well, like, it's on here. I can't I can't I can't have this on here and be like quitting. And so like I just that's the thing, is that like rather it's more important for me to like kind of see something through than it is for me to be a quitter.
yeah.
So I don't know.
No,
That's as fundamental as I can get.
well, I want to thank you for your openness, your willingness, your authenticity in this interview that of course went way beyond musicianship and everything. And I want to thank you for your willingness to just be open, because that sort of thing, it helps people. And it shows the hard work that it takes to overcome something, to be great at a thing, because nobody is ever just 100% built for what it is that they're doing, right?
No, no.
We all have to overcome things, and sometimes it comes with getting your face punched a
Yeah,
couple of times to get yourself to where it is that you need to be as a successful person. And
yeah.
so, any kind of final thoughts here?
No, it's well, first of all, I just want to thank you for having me on and for allowing me to ramble and share all this stuff, and frankly helping me to look back on some parts of my life and go, wow, that's really interesting, because I just never I'm so busy trying to move forward that I never look back. And so thank you for that. And then the other part is I was going to joke about how you said no one's you know 100% built to do the things that they do, and I was going to say, like, well, LeBron is.
Okay,
LeBron is
not
us.
everybody, but some people.
like LeBron absolutely is. but but no, I mean, I think it's funny, I don't like I never really think about, like, how being authentic can help somebody, right? I never think about that. It's like, well, this is who I am, and I don't mind sharing it or whatever. But I mean, I can only hope that it does, because I that's the one thing that like, of all of the amazing things that my family has, and all of the amazing things that my family represents, one of the things is just sheerly just helping people in any way you can, and just showing up. And so if this does help somebody, and if this really does, like, if somebody hears this and goes, okay, well, if he can do it, I can do it, life made. Because I would never consider myself to be somebody special, like, in the sense of, like, I'm like, look at me and all the things I've been through. It's like, no, man. If anything, it's just like, if I can do it, you absolutely can do it. So so it's just so really just thank you for giving me the place to speak on this and to allow me to be safe with it and everything. So thank you, Jeremy.
Absolutely. And where should people go to find out more about you?
Okay, so visit so online, visit www.jdlyon.net, and it's really simple for all social media, just at JD Lyon Music. And you can find me on all of your streaming platforms by searching JD Lyon. And feel free to reach out, send me a message, tell me I look weird, whatever, and I'm here for it.
Thank you for sharing your story. And to everybody else out there, please like and subscribe to the Mindful Mutiny podcast. Please leave a comment. Please listen to the wonderful music of JD Lyon. And there's so many links on his website to listen to the things that he has produced over a lifetime. And if you're a young musician and you're looking for somebody to work with, please get in touch with JD Lyon. His information is on his website. And in everything you do, go be something great.